That's not going to suit England at all.
This could be an upset.
This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and joining me, as always, World Cup winning Wallaby Ewen McKenzie and a successful Super Rugby coach, and Eddie Jones. Let's get to the games this weekend, because there is so much to look forward to, so much to enjoy. You know, this is our greatest tournament, our greatest annual tournament, and I think everyone all around the world just loves, Six Nations rugby. So England, Ireland at Allianz Stadium in Twickenham. The referee is Andrea Pardi. Andy Farrell has decided that Sam Prendergast needs a rest for this weekend. Jack Crowley will start at 10. Kieran Frawley will cover him on the bench. There's also 5 other changes. Ty Furlong, Ty Byrne, Josh van der Fleer and Jamison Gibson-Park all return to the starting 15, and Jamie Osborne, Robert Ballacoon and James Lowe. Unchanged back 3, Stuart McCloskey and Gary Ringrose will continue in the midfield. For England, Henry Pollock starts at 8. Maro Itoje plays his 100th game. And Tom Curry and Ollie Lawrence come into the starting team. Sam Underhill and Guy Pepper drop to the bench. Eddie Jones, your assessment, your preview of this particular match.
Yeah, well, I think, selection-wise, England, I've been trying to think about them a little bit. Underhill, is one of those guys. I can understand him being left out. He's a pure athlete and gets tired in game. And I think we saw him in the second game. He probably fell off a bit, got himself up. He's an intelligent boy, like a real athlete, and struggles back-to-back games. So Curry coming in will make a hell of a difference there. Although, if you look at Curry, he's been playing 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. So the start of game will be a big difference for him. Pollock, first game starting. I don't know about him. I see some great things with him, and then I just wonder whether he's a starting guy. So I think that back row, where they're going to have to match Ireland around the breakdown. I think, Ireland will probably go back to their more phased game and then use the short side with Gibson-Park. I think England will resort back 100% to their strong kicking game. They'll resist all the media noise. I can't get a real feel for the game, mate. Sorry, okay. I'm not going to be much there.
Ewen McKenzie, can you help me?
No, not really. I think it's a bit of it's a game of chicken, really. And Ireland's gone, by virtue of the fact that they changed their team the week before. They've actually reintroduced all the players you would have expected to be there anyway, Gibson-Park and the like. Change at 10, so they're looking like the Ireland of what we know of in recent years. So they'll be up for the game. I think that by some of those changes last week, you're going to get the best performances out of some of those guys coming back in. I think Prendergast, I think that's been iffy anyway, and I think that the change there was probably coming. But you've got Furlong coming back in Byrne, Van der Fleer, they're sort of like regulars, aren't they? So so that tells me we know where they're going to play. They'll play their way, and England's going to play their way. So I don't think there's going to be any sort of tactical surprises in that sense. What happened in the game of chicken is, though, you've now got Pollock and Curry, and Eddie's made the point Curry's short on match time, and I agree on Pollock. All his football's been off the bench, even with the Lions. He, as a starting player, I know he's done well in the premiership, but this will be a physical game. I think it'll be an intense physical game, and I don't know if that suits him. The early part of the game, that's the first 30 minutes, whether that's going to suit Pollock or not, because he tends to be very good at finding opportunity in the slightly wider spaces. And I'm not saying that's not. I'm not saying that as a slight. I'm just saying he's got a very good ability to be able to read the game and pop up in the right place. But whether those opportunities are going to be there, I guess if they play their kicking game, he can feed off that. Any fractured ball, those sorts of things will suit him. So I just see a very, very intense game, very hard to pick a winner. I'd go with England at home, but Ireland, I think that coach there has managed to resurrected the intent, because he's given a few guys a rest, and I think they'll be keen to prove that they shouldn't have been given a rest, and they want to be out there starting. And I think that makes a big difference. So I don't know. It's hard to read much more than that. Italian referee. I hope it's doesn't get messy on that side of things.
So Eddie Jones, Ewen McKenzie thinks England at home for you.
Just when Ewan was talking, just been thinking, like, how influential have the Nines been in the Six Nations? Yeah, and the Nines are influential when you get quick ball. And Gibson-Park, definitely on last Saturday when he came on the benefit of quick ruck ball, they started to get a bit of quick ruck ball. Yeah, he lifted the tempo of the game, and they look like an immeasurably better team. Mitchell, doesn't play that role. He's a very good player. Don't get me wrong, very good player, but he's a very individual player. He tends to look for stuff for himself rather than get it. He doesn't bring his forwards runners into the game, and England don't play that sort of game. They play a off the ruck type game. Forward sits back. They play even when they're on the front foot, they generally play a very structured, methodical game of rugby, which George Ford at his best is very good at playing. But when you're not getting that any sort of quick ball, like England looked ordinary against in the last game, and so I'm just thinking maybe Ireland might sneak this one, but it'll go right down the wire. I think on the back of Gibson-Park.
Okay,
it's a good point. Now Eddie's made me think a bit more. I mean, the refereeing, and I made this point the other day about Ireland are very good at sort of lingering around the back of rucks and sort of like generating slow ball, and that's not going to suit, based on what Eddie's just told us, that's not going to suit England at all, and it's not going to allow it's not going to help the Pollocks and the like. So it'll be interesting how the referee manages the back of the ruck, and where he's looking for a clean. If it had been a Kiwi ref, we'd probably see a cleaner outcome there, but we'll see. That's probably a good point, but it could go either way, this game. I'll stick with the home team, but when in doubt, go with the home team, but most likely be wrong.
And Eddie Jones, just a final point, Maro Itoje, the 9th English rugby player to reach 100 games to captain his team at Twickenham. One of the true greats of our sport, a great talisman, wonderful leader. It's a wonderful accomplishment, and to do it at home in front of the home crowds, it'll be a special occasion for him.
Yeah, that's a 2020 100, isn't it? That's a quick 100. Yeah. How many tests has he made? I don't think you could count on one hand the number of tests he's missed. So, firstly, his durability and his physical toughness. And I think, he came into the game as this energetic disruptor. Like, he changed the game of rugby for a while in his own way. That energy. He was like Pollock 10 times. Like, they talk about Pollock now. Like, think back to what Itoje was like back then, and now he's matured into a pretty good captain. But this will be 100th test. They'll lose big test, and if you look back at the Scotland game, one of the things that was really obvious for the England team is when they got into trouble, there was a lack of togetherness. And you could see that perceptibly, and that's the only time you get tested. Everyone's connected, everyone's together. It's only when the heat goes on you really see it. And he's going to have that situation again. I'm sure he would learn from last Saturday. So it'll be a big test for him in his 100th. But great achievement, mate. Great achievement.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, I used to love, like, back in those days when he was young, the early days of when you were looking after England and he'd be in the tunnel before the game, screaming and carry on, getting onto the field. It was like the energy that he had was just so infectious, and it used to just drive that wonderful intensity throughout his teammates. So anyway, yeah, congratulations to Maro Itoje. So, Wales, Scotland, Steve Tandy's made 4 changes after the big loss last weekend to France. The Scarlets pair Sam Costello and Tane Plumtree come in, as well as Dragons lock Ben Carter, and Gabriel Hammer-Webb will be handed his first cap. The big news really for Scotland is Blair Kinghorn and Duhan van der Merwe are back into the side. A few other minor changes around that, but Eddie Jones, your assessment of this particular game, Wales-Scotland in Cardiff, and the referee, if I just grab my notes here, is Matthew Carley.
Right, so there's plenty of red and yellows. He's the king. Like, he's going to be 3 yellows, 1 red. So I reckon they'll be saying, right, boys, who's going to get the yellow first? Who's going to get the red? So they're practicing all week, 12 versus 13. Like, Carling's a special. And he's a good referee and good guy, but he loves the red and yellow. They reckon they couldn't find Steve Tandy on Monday, mate. He was down in the coal mines looking for players. Right. Wales, seriously, they're just struggling to find. He's got a tough job there. They're just struggling to find international quality players, and it's all come at the same time. If it hadn't come at the same time, they would have been able to manage it. But they lost all their best players virtually all at the same time. You think about Biggar, all those guys, Alan Wynne Jones. They all left around the same time. So he's got a tough job, but and they were just out of their depth against France, and that can happen. They find something special against Scotland at home? Like you're delving in an emotional potty. It's not going to be tactical. It's if that group can find something a little bit special at the start of the game and shot stop, because Scotland are going to be coming in, their shoes will be shined, there'll be a smile on their face, they've had a good week, they're top of the pops again. So there's that little opportunity for them to get them early in the game. If they can get them early with some good old-fashioned Welsh physicality, then it could be an upset. Otherwise, it could be a pretty ugly day, mate.
Ewen McKenzie?
Yeah, well, if the refereeing goes as Eddie says, then Scotland might be the reverse for Scotland from last week. But, I think, like Bob Dwyer used to say, to win a World Cup, you've got to have 5 world-class players in your team. Well, I think Wales are a long way from that scenario, and it's sad, but it's where they're at. So it's a really good. I mean, they can bunker down. I guess if they stick with the core group of players that they think that they can kick on, then they'll just ride it out. But they need to focus on the every 5-minute block of the game and see how they can impose themselves and put pressure on. But they'll be looking at it from the point of view that Scotland had the win last week, but where's Scotland been? They've been a bit up and down in recent times, and so they'll be hopefully seeing some sort of opportunity there for them to be able to focus on. But they'll be going 5-minute blocks and try and make it as physical as possible and see what happens. See if they can knock them out of their rhythm. But I just saw against France, I didn't see great defensive structure. And France got through. They were very slippery, but they got through too easily at times, and that's always defence is always a good indication of where you're up to in terms of mentality, and I think that they're suffering a little bit, so it's going to be hard to overcome that. So I think Scotland will get there, but I don't. Again, I think that it won't be easy the whole way, but they should get there. And to be honest, Scotland needs to. They need to show everyone that they're a side that can win on all occasions. That's what the good sides do. They win all occasions. They're playing, away from home. They've got to be able to win on all occasions, and that's what France did last week. And now it's almost an obligation for Scotland to do that, to show that they're back. If they don't perform well this week, then everyone's going to all the naysayers are going to come back out again.
If you look at the way the game's going, I think, everyone's got a defence system, and defence became highly systemised. And what we've seen over the last period of time, particularly with the contest kicks, and then it becomes an unstructured situation. So there's no system to allow you to defend that, and then it becomes being good defenders, making good decisions, working in threes together. And I think, Wales have come through a very systemised period of rugby. They were very methodical in the way they played, and it was almost anti-Welsh. If you think about the history of Wales, they were like the Northern Hemisphere version of Australia. They had smart players. They could play the game well off the cuff, and they've lost a bit of that. And I think Steve Tandy and his coaching staff are trying to get a bit of that back into their team, but it just takes time, and they're really struggling with it at the moment. But the teams who have got good defenders are the teams who are able to defend particularly the contest kick and what comes out of that, subsequently out of that.
All right. Well, we look forward to watching that particular match from the Principality Stadium in Cardiff, and let's hope a few more Welsh fans get along to support their team this weekend. And finally, the last match of the round, France versus Italy in Lille in the north of France. The referee is Andrew Brace. Ewen McKenzie, can your Italian boys get up?
Well, there's a bit of familiarity, and I think that, as I said, I don't know if they fear France. I think that they have found themselves to be competitive, and I think they know how to trigger each other. They've got a bit of flair, the Italians. They've got the abrasive edge that you need to be able to put pressure on. So I think that they'll be competitive. I haven't seen the squads or the teams for this. Have there been teams yet, Pemby? No.
They haven't. At the time of recording, they haven't been announced.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see what Galtier does with his selections, whether he, goes to his wider squad and see what that could mean in terms of cohesion or whatever. I mean, the French have a very unique style of play, and they all seem to fit in and understand, and they've got, at the moment, they've got, their second rows are outstanding in terms of their ability to contribute in general play. So they've got a different style of football going on, which is working well. But the Italians have done a great job in defence. We saw that against Scotland, and they were very competitive against Ireland. So I don't think it's going to be a walkover, and they'll want to try and get back in the winning ways. This is a classic game, one of these ones where I think, I don't know if it'll be a surprise, an upset, but I think it'll be a lot closer than people think. I think the Italians are the real deal. I think they can mix it.
Eddie Jones, for you.
Yeah, well, Italy, physically have been good, and you look at their players. I was talking to one of the older Italian players, used to coach, and he's commenting, so right. Physically, they look good. They look hard. They look well conditioned. And they play like that. They contest the ball hard. They've changed their game through their kicking and their breakdown contests. They've got the 7 and 8 are dynamic jacklers, put pressure on the ball, and then 12 and 13 are pretty handy as well. And then they've got those two Aussie blokes like Lynagh, who's out of the Queensland school of Lynagh. He's gone from a good player at Harlequins to be an above average test player, and his ability to win the ball in the air, and his hard as they come. Just look at him. He's all elbows and knees. He flies in the contests. And Digby Iaone, he's not Digby. What's his name? Iaone on the other wing.
Monty.
Not Digby. Monty. I think
cousin.
Oh, cousin is it? And and like he goes hard too, and he's a great example of perseverance. Like, he didn't make it in New Zealand, Australia, went to Italy, got into a little bit of trouble at Benetton, but found his way again, and has turned into a true competitor. And their kicks are spot on, like their 9 and 10 kicks are spot on. They contest hard as the breakdown. So they've got the hard parts of the game right, which keeps them in the contest all the time. If you compare it back to the Italy side that went to the last World Cup, they played some wonderful rugby up to the World Cup, but they didn't have that hardness about it. And again, if you look at it, this is a team that's probably been 6 years in the making. It's not an overnight success. It's a team 6 years in the making. They're hard in the contest. And if France are a little bit off, then this could be an upset. And I don't know the French record at Lille, whether they like playing there or they don't like playing there. Like, it's up the north, isn't it? Lille.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Got beautiful centre of the city, I think. Yeah, really. But I'm not sure about the French record there. I don't think they've spent too much time in the centre of the city.
The city suffered a bit in the war. But it's I played a test. Well, I don't know if it's the same stadium. I played a test against France up there. Oh, sorry, I didn't play a test. I was injured. I commentated the test up there. It was Gordon Bray.
I think it's a new stadium. Up there for football.
Yeah, I think so. Played up there for someone. It's a brilliant stadium, like close.
Yeah,
right. Red and black, I think the seats are. Like, beautiful stadium. So it'll be a good atmosphere there.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby unity.
Now, Eddie Jones, we was having a chat off air during the week, and you've been doing some analysis, and we discussed that it might be a useful thing for the audience to take a view of the Six Nations at the end of the first 2 rounds as we head into the third round. And again, the audience has asked that you two, as leading coaches, bring your insights to exactly what it is that you're seeing. So as we head into round 3, so far, Eddie Jones, what are the key things that people need to be understanding and looking for in the performances of their teams?
Well, if you look at popular opinion, England were going to conquer the world after round 1. And in round 2, it's all doom and gloom. They've got to make changes. They've made enough changes. Their rugby's outdated. And I think it's just trying to get a perspective of things, similar with Scotland. Scotland after round 1 where, there was no more Red Bull for Gregor, or was there going to be a lot of Red Bull for Gregor? And the team had run its course, and I think, if you watch those games, it just strikes me even more watching the more rugby you watch, how much luck plays in the game. Like, you've got to have great intent, and sometimes you can see in the teams, like Scotland, definitely there was a difference in their intent in week 1 and week 2, and what I mean by that was that how the players approach the game with a physicality. Maybe round 1 they were thinking, well, we're going to win this game. Maybe, just at the back of their heads they're thinking, well, this is going to be a tough game, but we just got to do our job here. Whereas round 2, they're playing like their life depends on it. And they get a few, the first 3 kicks, I think they win. So they get double possessions. Every ball seems to bounce their way. The game flows, and now they're on top of the world. But now, the third game, then they've got to reset themselves, refocus. And then you've got England playing Ireland. So England, again, first game, as I said, they were going to colonise the world again in rugby. They were going to be the number one thing. And now this week, they're under the pressure. They're under massive pressure. Yeah, and you can see also that Ireland are a lot of pressure. Andy Farrell may regret talking about Irish fans. That's always a difficult thing. Whenever you at all criticise fans, you get yourself in trouble because you can't be right. you can't be right. Yeah, and fans are never wrong. And particularly with social media now, they're never wrong. So just that contrasting and where people see the teams. And the fact is that both of the teams are probably going okay. You know, all three teams are probably going okay. But who can bring their best to the table in the third game is going to be important. I think we'll see more this week of where the teams really are. Yeah, where consistently they're able to pitch themselves.
So you mentioned luck, but you've also been talking about the importance of starting well. Why is it that is so important, Ewen McKenzie? Why is it that you need to get into the game early, and that seems to be a contributing factor to a good performance?
Well, I think Eddie mentioned the word intent. He did mention the word intent. I think intent's a really big part of it. And in rugby, and other sports, you can demonstrate your intent, particularly through your defence and the physicality you bring to the game. So they're big aspects of it. I looked at the games. I looked at the Italy-Scotland game. You know, Scotland ran a lot at Italy during that game, but Italy were more than matched them physically, and in terms of the ruck contest, but also just in terms of tackling. And in the end, they didn't have the same numbers statistically, but they won the game. So the intent of Italy was pretty good at home. Scotland did, they did all the fancy stuff, but didn't come away with anything, didn't make a line break. So the intent is often demonstrated in defence, and that hasn't, and that's been variable. So that can change week to week. As Eddie said, it doesn't take much. You only need to have one person that's not attuned mentally, doesn't push up hard enough, and suddenly you got a hole in the line or whatever, and that's where you come a cropper. So the coach's job is to try and tune up the entire group, and you've got to do that differently because everyone's motivated differently. And so, it's a big job to get around the team and make sure everyone's in the right space. So that's part of it. The tournament's short. Like, it's as big a tournament and greater tournament as it's a short tournament. One mistake and you're in shooter's ditch. Like, that's what basically happens. You lose one. Like England, I was back in England, and now you're scratching around looking to see if they can. They're going to have to beat France at the end away to have any chance of winning the Six Nations, but they can't win them. You're not going to win. Not going to clean sweep. So that's gone. So then I looked at the tournament initially and said, "Well, where are the big games?" And I flagged England, the Scotland-England game as a big game. It wasn't sort of on form. It wasn't a big game, but on history and other aspects, it was a big game. It turned out to be a big game, and now that's changed the shape of the tournament. But from the top end of the tournament, Italy's win over Scotland, that's changed it as well. So then you look forward in the tournament and go, okay, what do we got? Well, if you're looking for intent and emotion and things like that, France-Italy coming up, that's an interesting game because, they've been close in recent times. I think they had a draw recently. So look, they've been close. So you can't just assume that's a gimme because Italy's demonstrated capacity in intent, but also in terms of skill across the board. We saw their scrum effort the other day against, that was pretty impressive. You don't see that too often. So you got that. You've got Scotland-France is another big game. France has fallen to Scotland many times in Scotland. Then you've obviously got France-England. So you look forward and think, well, where are the big games now? Because there's only 3 games to go. So that's sort of where you're at. But it's a short tournament. A week's a long time in rugby, so you have to get it right. And that's the one thing now, by shortening, taking out one of those breaks, it's sort of made the things feel a little bit more, the imperative is suddenly a little bit tighter because the games are suddenly on you and you haven't got time to fix it. So you've got to get it right on the night. And that's probably one of the beauties of the tournament is that you don't get a chance to make a mistake. And then that leads to things like discipline. And I know we talked about cards and things like that, but fundamentally discipline's a major aspect. Again, brain explosions and whatever will cost you in the tournament. So it will cost your team in the tournament as well. So they're all things that that's what makes the tournament interesting. because it can suddenly, it can turn in a week, and it has in a way, if you're on form, although the bookmakers had France as the favourites, but England were there. So, yeah, there's suddenly pressure on England now, and Ireland sort of come back, and France is sailing along, and everyone's going, oh, well, that's a sure thing. But is it? As I said, they had a draw against it. Look, it's middle of the game's in France, but so there are things there, and it might get down to that last game against England, and that's where England's going to have to show that their intent and their game plan is the right one for the occasion. So there's plenty ahead, but it's 3 games to go. That's it.
Lots to look forward to. But Eddie Jones, you've actually coached for many years in this competition. How do you get that right? How do you sort of, there are changes to the teams most weeks. You move from success to failure. It's a short turnaround. What techniques do you use to apply into your team to develop the cohesion, to develop the confidence, to keep everyone moving in the one direction so that you can either retrieve momentum or maintain momentum?
Generally speaking, there's 2 things. The general team environment you've got, and you've got to try to keep out the noise, keep out the poison from the media, make sure they don't listen too much to what's being said, whether it be good or bad. And they're going to listen to it. So what you're trying to do is get the right message in their head. And then individually, if you think about, the point that Ewan made, that you've got one player who's not pushing up, not doing their job, it can affect the team. If you look at France, the influence of someone like Ramos, who basically controls their attack. And from the outside, it doesn't look like he controls their attack, but he's so influential in when they decide to go, because they play that one pass game off the pomp. But when they see the opportunity to attack, it's generally Ramos is the one who's the igniter of that. So say he goes into the game, his Achilles is a bit sore, or his girlfriend or his wife rings him up in the morning and says, look, we've got a problem at home, the bathroom's leaking, something's not happening, and that can then affect his game, and that's the things you don't see. Like, when you was speaking there, I was thinking that the key role in most of this is who puts the psychological imprint on the team, because there's so little between the teams. Who's the most outstanding player in the tournament? Probably Dupont. He probably has more effect on any game than anyone. But apart from him, there's probably no one of that ilk. So it's such a team game. And how you get the team right, like psychologically and physically, I'd say. Like physically is the other big thing. Like playing 3 games in a row, how do you get the players right 3 games in a row? It's how much training you do. Do you do enough? You don't do enough. And it's that fine balance of being prepared for the game and the players feeling like they want to go, like they want to hit. Like, I was just watching before we got on here a bit of the Rugby League World Cup Challenge, and the Broncos are getting absolutely belted. Well, they were. I don't know if they are now. And you can see the level of intent was different between Hull, Kingston Rovers and the Broncos. But they play 100 games, and the Broncos probably win 95 of them, right? But the 5 games, the 6 Nations, as Ewan made the point, like you don't get second chances. A short comp, you got to be good on your day. So there's all those factors that you're looking at, you're trying to get together. And as a case, you're like a mad scientist, trying to find out what the right balance is.
So my old coaching mate, Bruce McLean from New York, he sent me a Spotify video called Coaching Culture, and Gordon Tietjens was on that. And he pointed me to the 19th minute, and it's where Tietjens talked about with his sevens coaching. And this is what you do to sort of, I guess, bulletproof yourself from the intent issue we're just talking about, is he would recruit what he has green, yellow, red categorisation of players, and he recruits 80% green, and they're the ones that you don't need to watch. They will train at the right intensity. They'll train independently. They'll do all the right things. They'll go out and give you what I probably call a budgeted performance. And he made the point, he said, you think of a player and the first reaction is, are they going to be a green or a yellow? Yellow is a guy you're not quite sure, and then red's the guy that's going to stuff up your team culture, right? So you don't want any reds in your squad. I'm talking about recruitment and selection and whatever. You don't want any reds because they're going to stuff up your culture. So then, and the yellows, you can afford to have 20% because they might bring something, and you can probably, as a coach, push them towards being a green. But they'll probably never be a green. And he gave some examples there. If you said Richie McCaw, you automatically think green, right? And so you can say a player's name, but if you say a player's name and you don't automatically think green, they're probably a yellow, right? So his idea is to obviously get the squad. Well, it doesn't matter what squad it is. It's a bit harder on the club side where you have to take what you get. But in a situation where you're selecting or whatever, you're trying to get those guys that'll empty the tank and whatever, and train. It's a really good point. Training unsupervised, do all the little things right. And there's plenty of little things you can do right in any given week. And they're the things that Eddie talked about before. You get the phone call at 7 o'clock in the morning on game day, and and your girlfriend wants another 50 tickets. That's where you get the things like that. So they're things that you need to, but it's interesting the categorise, and that's how you can bulletproof it, by sorting out your squad at the front end and making sure you've got the right types of players.
I reckon there's that great story. I remember when Jose Marino started in England, and he was coaching Chelsea, and he got beaten in the game. And he said, the other team's shopping at Waitrose, I'm shopping at Little's, and so the eggs you buy is not as good, and when you mix it up with an omelette, the omelette from Waitrose tastes a lot better than the omelette from Lidl. And it's and Tietjens in his era, like if you think again, then if you look at the other topic about New Zealand about talent, like I reckon that's a great story that Ewan told, because Tietjens had all the best talent in the world, so he could pick green, red, yellow. And there's stories that the Lynagh story turns up to a seventh camp. He's not quite fit, so he's not green. He's not green at that time. He goes home. Well, how can you send Lynagh home? Like, everyone else has got him on a chain, pulling him through the door. He sends him home because he's not green for that tournament.
So around the communication and the setting of the psychological environment for the players to try to create the best possible environment to get them to kick off with the right level of intent. Eddie Jones, how do you go about assembling your messages? How do you think about it? How do you evaluate whether or not your messages are getting through? How are you thinking about it in any given week? What's your process? And Ewen McKenzie, I'd be interested to know your process about what you used to do in terms of your communication. We'll start with you, Eddie.
Well, I think it's just getting your messages right, mate. The right tone, the clarity, and obviously you used to do a lot to help with that. But it's just getting the right message. Like I can always remember first thing with Japan. Japan had never won a game in Europe. So we went there on a tour. We had Romania, Georgia, and then France Barbarians at the last game. So we set out, target for the tour was be the first team ever to win Europe. So we beat Romania, beat Georgia, and then we played French Barbarians, and we got belted. We played it up the north, 60-40 or whatever. And I always remember the little halfback Sumi, this cheeky little bugger. He comes up and he says, "It's your fault we got beaten today. It's your fault." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you told us we only needed to win. We needed to win Georgia, Romania. We didn't talk about French Barbarians." And he was right, because it's just the succinctness and the clarity of your message, and the number of times you repeat it. It's got to resonate with the players. Like, and today it's different again with the younger generation. Someone was telling me last night that these kids in Japan, they watch Netflix at 1.5 speed. They never watch normal speed. They want everything quick. So if you want to get a message through, you got to get quick. You haven't got a long period of time to catch their imagination. And you miss that, and you miss the opportunity. It's crazy.
Yeah. And what about for you, Ewan? But and probably to the point of how did you think about it? Were you sitting there on a Sunday at the beginning of the week's preparation, talking about, okay, well, what's the Monday message? What's the Tuesday message? I've got to get to this person. I've got to get to that person. This person likes it visually. This person wants it another.
That's spot on.
Infinitely complex, isn't it?
Yeah. The learning and the ability to take information in varies between players. So you've got to talk to them. You've got to show them. You've got to do it. You might just putting video clips up on the screen doesn't mean they're actually taking anything in. So you got to, every time you're in a team meeting, you got to be watching. You have to watch the room. So when you've got other assistant coaches and things talking, you got to be watching and seeing if people are actually concentrating on what's going on or whether it's just words. So, and then, but to make sure you got to cover all bases. You got to go out there and you got to walk through things. You've got to run through at full pace. You've got to do it under pressure. You show them videos. You got to talk. You've got to draw it. And you've got to meet one-on-one and go through it for certain individuals. So it's all of those things. But that's the specifics and maybe tactical. The actual themes for the week or whatever that just evolves. And I remember that game at the Super Rugby when you're playing South Africa, and often you do well in the tournament. You'd have to go to South Africa and you'd bomb out over there a couple of games, and that'd pretty much stuff you for the tournament or put you in a difficult position in the tournament. So, I borrowed from history. I remember once the year we won, I borrowed from history and took the team over there, and we introduced the Cortez, who burnt his boats when he landed in Mexico, so that the troops couldn't run away. So that was our theme, was burning the boats. So when we got to South Africa, we burnt the boats, and that was it. We had to win. Otherwise, and we did. We beat the Stormers in with reverse tactics. We beat the Stormers in Cape Town, and so that the players enjoyed that. It was a bit of history, but you had to explain the history, but they got it, and the principle was right. So we actually came back from South Africa with enough points, and we went to win the tournament. But that was so you have moments like that are important. It's different every week, but you've got to put time in that. It's just not just rolling out the same old stuff every week. That's pretty boring. If it seems boring for you, it's definitely boring for the players. As Eddie said, they're watching things at 1.5 speed. I didn't even know that. So that's a real challenge. Yeah.
Is there any sort of fail safe? Was there anything that you would always go back to as this is my most effective way of getting a message across? Ewen McKenzie.
No, I don't think there's any one way. I used to put a bit of effort into. There are moments when the coach is talking to the team at half time or prior to the game, and there's opportunities there, and it's not banging locker doors and things like that. It's actually getting them focused on the key things and making the game important to individuals and whatever. So you've got to try and so I put time into that because I thought you had to get players focused on the moment and get their heads out of the grandstands or wherever they were and make sure they're in the moment and ready to go. So that's important. I mean, if you're the fans out there, I'll tell you what you do when you're watching any game of sport. Just watch when the coach is talking at half time. Watch what the players are doing, and that's where you got to work out where you sit. How much information you present at half time is important because whether the players are watching or paying attention, it's a critical thing. You can be there talking and making yourself feel better because you might be behind or whatever, and you're trying to. But if the players aren't, they're looking at their socks, they're fiddling with their boots or whatever it is. So if you, as an amateur, sitting there watching, as an amateur fan watching, just have a look and see what players do at half time when the coach is talking. It's always a good indication of whether you've got the focus you need to be able to go forward and or whether your messaging is getting across. And if you watch that, you might say, well, I didn't bother talking at half time. Or it's one thing, or you might break into smaller groups, do it a different way to try and get the message across, to get the focus, because you don't have long. They're tired. Lots of things might be going through your head. You've got to focus it in. So you can't just go through a a programmed before game or half time or whatever it is. You've got to make sure that the players are focused and taking the information in. So iPads, whatever it is, you see it in American sport, they do it different ways. So, but have a look next time you watch a game of sport or a game of rugby and see what the players are doing at half time.
Eddie Jones, before you, was there any one thing that you do that you know is your strongest communication tactic?
If I'd use that, mate, I'd have 100% success rate.
Yeah.
But I just going back to you two guys and Pemby, you know, your influence and people like you, like I used a bloke called Chuck Flower, I used a bloke called Chuck Flower, who at times was absolutely brilliant in coming up with a message. You know, that it resonated with the players, he could sell it. And so, and that right back at the Brumbies, remember we had Clark Perry, sports psych, Australian swimming. He was terrific as well. So finding someone like that, and the All Blacks, you know, one of the interesting things about the All Blacks is that they don't use Gilbert Anoka. And from all reports, everyone I've spoken to about him, you know, his role in the team had been absolutely massive in getting the right message, and then individually being able to massage it through players. You know, because you got the group response and then you got the individual response. I used to love Lynagh. You probably remember this one where you talk about when the Fords rattle the cage. Boys, we're going to rattle the cage.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And this, you know, immediately it strikes an image in your head. You know, we're going to go out there and really get stuck into those blokes. But yeah, so I think the role of the staff in and particularly specialist staff like yourself and, you know, with Bacon, Gilbert and Oak, Shook Fowler, those sort of people, you know, make a huge difference in being able to get the right message through and getting the right level of intent from the players. Because they all want to do it. Every player wants to do it.
That's right. And players like to often talk to different types of personalities. So the head coach might have a personality type, and you only see what's in front of you. So if you've got good other staff, they're watching everywhere behind you and whatever, so you can see what's, you know, you get a total picture. And if you need a different approach, well, maybe there's a different person that can get that message across. The idea is, in the end, you have to get the message across. Otherwise, you've got a flat tire, you know. So that's what you got to do. So that's where you need to have good people who have good observational skills.
All right. Well, listen now to the third voice, and what a week it kicked off last week online. Earlier, we published on Monday, and by Tuesday we'd had over 1 million engagements across our platform. Certainly people taking exception to some of the positions, people giving us the benefit of their opinion. Speak Your Truth said, this podcast is absolutely terrible. Use or something or other. This is an awful podcast. It is so boring. Other people, Tristan Earl said, way too much chat every week about the referees. But other people were kinder, but certainly lots of activity. So a big thanks to all of you, positive, negative. It's great to see the passion out there, and we can agree to disagree. But, Italy's coach, Gonzalo Quesada, was actually resharing some of our content. The Times in London were giving us attribution from some of the comments. Planet Rugby, SA Rugby Magazine. But just to everybody out there, just a big thanks, actually, for getting involved because it's great. It's a wonderful time to have a conversation. It's great to see the passions. It's great to see that we can have different views. And by and large, everyone's quite civil in terms of their engagement, and long may that continue. So anyway, some other comments and questions. Alexander Gordon has said, I love this show because it promotes rugby and does everything it can to grow the game. Thank you very much, Alexander. But a question from Alexander to you, to Eddie and to Ewan. Which coaching environment has been the most satisfying to be a part of, and why? Ewen McKenzie, I'll start with you. What was the most satisfying coaching environment that you have been involved with, and why?
It varies. Obviously, if you're the head coach, that's the environment where you're pulling all the levers. So, you know, and I can talk about, and then each year's got its different things, and if you measure it by where you finish at the end of the season, that can be that's obviously a logical way of measuring it. But there are other measures, and that's where for me, like as a head coach, finding players, and Eddie and I have been as an assistant coach with Eddie, but also myself. When you find players and you recruit them at young ages, and they come in and you see them go on and improve and perform and end up playing for their country and end up being maybe world class. I'm thinking like the George Smiths and whatever. Then they cross over. It's not just 1 year, but that's being involved in those journeys where you talent ID and then develop the skill sets and the player reaches the potential that you might have seen when they were running around at 17 or 18. There's been a bunch of those types of players for me across the time, but Eddie and I were both involved in the George Smith, and I still remember the conversations that Eddie and I had, about going out and watching him play club football, and we did all that, and talking to him and all those sort of formative things because he was only a young kid at the time, and then he kicked on and became a world class player. That transcends across the whole thing, but that's probably for me been more important. And obviously, the other things are if you've got, I like the strategy of the game. If you've got games that are critical games, and you come up with a strategy that actually works and you get the outcome you want, that they're all individual moments that then the composite of all that gives you the outcome at the end of the season. But you've got to win those critical moments. I mentioned the game against the Stormers in 2011, like that. If we hadn't won that, we wouldn't have finished in the ladder position to be able to give us the home run, the finals opportunity. So there are critical moments along the way that are important. So I see it that way. It's not just a season or being with a team. It's about the journey and some of the people and staff as well. I've had a lot of staff, and so has Eddie, a lot of staff that have kicked on and become, Les Kiss, for instance, was my defence coach at the Waratahs. Now he's going to be the next Wallaby coach. So it's nice to see those sorts of journeys. There's a bunch of players around. One of the assistant coaches for the French team, Laurent Sombre, he was a guy I coached at Stade Francais. So it's good to see those things. So those guys kick on and reach their potential on and off the field. So there's people. So that's probably more for me.
Okay. Eddie Jones, can you put your finger on a particular environment or time that was your favourite?
Well, I was just, when you was talking, I remember we had that, the officers at Fishwick salute said, like you smell the sausage being burnt, the cockroaches that chase you up the staircase. They were sitting in that dingy room, watching a video of George Smith, and I remember we signed him for 20,000 Australian dollars, I think it was. I think he was a pretty good bargain at that time. But the best is always to come, mate. So next World Cup for me. But had a number of experiences, and reality is, like, players are always pretty good. Like, I've always found players to be pretty good. Like, you'll get your one or two, but players are good. They all generally want to get better. If you got too many that don't want to get better, you got to get rid of them. So it's when you do something special, when you play above yourself, I think, or when you get players to believe they can be better than what they have been, I think is the most enjoyable parts.
And he asked the second question. You've also enjoyed playing the game. So do you enjoy coaching the game or playing the game? What's better, coaching or playing?
Well, when you're 66, you don't get a choice to play, mate. No, well, I think you got to love both. Like, love playing, and to coach, you got to love coaching. You got to love the game. We were talking about it with a couple of Japanese coaches last night. You got to love the game. To be a good coach, you got to love the game, not love coaching, love the game. And I think, the consistency about playing and coaching and trying to do it well is that you got to love both. And that comes back down to, in a lot of times, the first coach you ever had, I think. You talk to players, I always ask them, who was your first coach? Because it has a massive bearing on on their approach to rugby.
For you, Ewen McKenzie, you're a World Cup winning player, a Super Rugby winning coach and very successful international coach as well. Do you prefer coaching or prefer playing?
Eddie's right about the love, and we played because we loved playing the game. There's no money in it. We even the World Cup that I played in that we won, that was like $20 a day job. That's what it was. There's no contracts or anything. You were playing because you loved playing, and you got the opportunity to do it. I think playing the game in a way is easier. Like coaching's like 7 days a week. The players, they have to live it and whatever, but they're things that, and these days it's managed for them. There's a lot of stuff that's put in place that allows them to perform their best, and that's a much more complicated beast than it was back in the day when we were playing. When we were playing, you had one or two coaches, and you're lucky if you had a physio, and the doctor might turn up occasionally, but that was it. Strapping was what was strapping. Like those things. But these days, you get strapped for everything, every bit of training you do. So there's a lot of facilitation around the edges that exists. So in the way, the players are given their best opportunity to play. And if I look now, I'd probably go, when you see players and whatever, they're doing it because it's a job, or they're doing it because they love the game. And that's probably one of the genuine questions that pops up into my mind every now and then. I mean, there's no doubt we all played and we all worked in parallel, but we kept playing, and we'd back up and we'd play 2 games a weekend and things like that. You just did stuff, wasn't sort of it was just what you did because you loved playing. And to extend on that, Eddie's right. I see players now, and I know that they'll make good coaches because they're analytical about the game. And what people don't realise is that, when we played the game, Eddie and I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to each other about club football and the games we were playing in and our opportunities, tactics and things like that. So because we're interested in the mechanics of the game, and that's how you develop as a coach. You want to work out what makes the game tick and how you can influence that. And we spent a lot of time outside of playing the game, when we're just training a couple of nights a week and playing, is talking about the game and how it functioned. So, and it's probably no coincidence that we kicked on and got involved in coaching.
Another question from Sam Winsett in Auckland. I went to the Blues and Chiefs game on Saturday. On almost every occasion, the ball was given to the inside centre to crash up. Because they were crashing into significant amount of bodies, it was impossible to get any quick ruck ball from the breakdown. And so immediately the teams degenerated into the style of throwing the ball to some forward pods before putting up the bomb. These coaches and players have had the best part of 9 months to consider an attack strategy. Eddie Jones, what's your view as to why they are doing what they are doing?
Well, it's a difficult one. It's a good question. Like, what has changed significantly in the game is the level of contest at the breakdown. And so the further you pass the ball, the more chance you've got of being turned over. And that's the reality of it. People don't like to talk about that, but that's the reality. You go 2, 3 passes, you go 3 passes, and then you've got a player who's generally fairly isolated, one-on-one, and that the next defender can generally beat your support player there, right? Unless the support player has got a certain amount of urgency. So the ball carrier, unless he wins that contest and creates some dominance, it's hard. It's not hard to retain possession, but there's a high risk involved. So teams tend to play fairly tight, 1-pass rugby, 2-pass rugby, so they can look after the ball. It doesn't mean you can't play another way, but you've just got to have a huge level of fitness, a huge level of skill, and then you can move the ball. But it's the safest way to play rugby at the moment, and that's why 70% of most attack is 1-pass rugby, and if you look back historically, it always has been. This is not something new.
Okay, Ewen McKenzie, your views?
Yeah, look, it's a good question because I thought the same thing. I was watching the whole Super round and I thought the same thing. I thought that the line speed, the defensive line speed, the ball was arriving as the defender was on that 1 pass. So there didn't seem to be a lot of space, and I thought that so then they resorted to kicking, and I thought the kick chase, the stuff that we've been watching in the Six Nations and even last year, the ability of the box kick and the contest, I thought that was poor in the first round. But generally, you're hoping that would improve, and most teams would start the tournament making sure that their defence and things like that are in tune, and that's goes to intent, and they'll try and develop their attack across the tournament. So you wouldn't expect to see everything to be in order in attack in the first round, but it looked a little bit pedestrian in that sense. That I thought, I'll have to look at the offside lines and whatever, but it just seemed to me that the defenders were able to get to the first pass receiver pretty quickly, and so it looked pretty dour in that sense. So the pick of the games for me was the Brumbies. I thought the Brumbies were able to get their depth right and were able to manipulate the force really well in the back 50 minutes. They were probably the pick of the teams for me in terms of being able to do something in attack in the first round. So let's see what happens.
So Sam goes on to say, my disappointment was made even stronger by the fact that when I turned on the Scotland-England game, I saw some high-quality strike moves with the ultimate recipient hitting the line square and at the advantage line. Eddie Jones, is it really the case that the Northern Hemisphere has overtaken us, New Zealand, in terms of attack strategy?
I wouldn't go so far as say that, but I think New Zealand's going through an interesting period where they've put all their eggs as a country into structured attack. Like everything's very structured for the Kiwis. So they went from, if you think back historically at most of the good New Zealand teams, and particularly John Mitchell had that 2003 team and he had them playing unbelievable rugby, which was all based on the back of counter-attacking. They kicked the counter-attack. Carlos Spencer would get the ball in the back. They'd shift it to the other side. You'd have Cullen, Lame all running. That they've gone away from that unstructured part a fair bit, and it's very structured. And all the Kiwi coaches around the world are preaching to be structured. Everything's got to be structured. They want to know 2 or 3 plays. It's almost like the old Brumbies in 2000. And I think that's probably coming to an end in terms of the way rugby's being played, particularly, as we've spoken about with the contestable kicks. So do they need to alter their methodology? They probably need to change it a little bit. And that'll come. They're not silly. It'll come.
Your views, Ewen McKenzie, on that one. Northern Hemisphere, have they overtaken New Zealand in terms of attack strategy?
I don't know. I agree with Eddie. I don't know about attack strategy, but I think that they're, I think that the ability to use the kick chase game, particularly the box kick and contest, I think they're doing really well in that space at the moment. And I thought that, if I'm using Super Rugby as a guide, the difference is you see the contest in the Six Nations games at the moment. In Super Rugby, all I saw last week was the ball, and I'm not talking every time. I mean, Potter did a good job contesting, but on the whole, the ball's kicked and someone catches the other side, and the contest is always 2 or 3 metres short. So there's no contest. So it's really just a turnover of possession, and then then they start and they get their opportunity to be able to hit it up and then see what happens. So it didn't really, the idea of the kick in the Northern Hemisphere is really kick and then get a contest and try and retrieve some of that ball or force an error. That contest didn't exist in the first round. I'm sure it'll get better. I was kind of hoping to see that was a part of the game that had improved based on what we saw in the Northern Hemisphere in the November Test series, where I thought that it's a skill set we need to improve. I didn't see much evidence of that in the first round, but let's hope.
All right, there are more questions to do with referees and other things, but I'm going to take the advice of some of our correspondents and give it a rest for this week. But Dominic Varley, Craig Bashford, Kevin A. Harris, Jordan Ryan, thank you so much for your questions, and we'll see if we can get back to them at some point in time. But again, thank you to everybody for contributing. And if you do see the content, give it a like, give it a share, make a comment, just get it moving around and about. We are very grateful for all the support that you have shown us. Eddie Jones, still no All Black coach. Is that a surprise to you?
I saw Robbie Deans yesterday. I asked him whether he's an option.
Yeah.
He
And
didn't
what was the answer? No, he
I
didn't
don't-
answer.
I don't think he wants to be involved. But I think the longer they've obviously got a process to do. But I think they're a bit lost, mate. I think they're lost their way.
What makes you say that?
The chairman spoke about trajectory. Well, usually when you sack a coach, you know you want to put in place. Like, yeah, that's the golden rule of employment, isn't it? Yeah, get rid of someone you know you're going to replace with. And maybe they didn't have that in place, and now they're thinking, right, they got their two homegrown ones, Rennie and Jamie Joseph. Both are excellent coaches and both could do a good job. But are they thinking, they're probably getting some advice, you need an experienced coach with them? Are they talking to Steve Hansen and Ian Foster about coming back? So it all, on the surface, it seems a bit muddled now. As I said, when you sack a case, you usually want to know, unless you're Nottingham Forest, you usually want to know who the next one is, right? So you don't want David Ted to be sitting inside that Greek owner at Nottingham Forest.
Have you been surprised, Ewen McKenzie? Would you have thought that there was a quick solution, a quick appointment or quicker appointment?
Probably for the same reasons. Normally you have some idea where you're going to go. You want to create the appearance of, and we've seen this plenty of times before, they sort of say they're going to have a worldwide search and they pick the guy that everyone knew they were going to pick. So, I would have thought that they might have struck early only to be able to put the question to bed and also to allow the person the maximum amount of time to be able to work on his team and also to be able to get out amongst the super teams and start looking at the talent and talking to players and things like that to try and get themselves set up for the Nations Cup.
It's actually, I read I thought it was quite a strange story that apparently they've sent people to Japan to observe Dave Rennie, and they've sent people to go and observe Jamie Joseph at the Highlanders. I would have thought that they would have had all of that covered up until this point. But anyway, we will wait and see who they select for that very important position, certainly for the game of rugby. Rugby unity is all about helping secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, and indeed the All Blacks and a strong All Blacks is a fundamental part of securing our future around the world. Lots of other rugby on the weekend as always. The under-20s are out and about. Wales take on Scotland. England take on Ireland, and France against Italy. I haven't as yet been able to catch up of much of the under-20s, but I do hope people are enjoying that. And in the Rugby Europe Championship this week, Georgia takes on Spain. That should be a good match. Belgium against Germany. Switzerland take on the Netherlands, and Portugal against Romania. And it is the second round of the Super Rugby competition. So lots of rugby to enjoy this weekend. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much again for your time today, Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie. And to you, the third voice, the people out there, thank you for coming along to have a listen today. Very grateful for your ongoing support. So please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.